Heard the click of the mic before I saw his face. Derek, our new VP of strategy. With a PowerPoint deck thicker than his resume and a Rolex that still had the Best Buy tag swinging from it. First slide. Some futuristic graphic of a rocket ship made of Excel cells and AI buzzwords. Second slide. A pixelated meme that said, "If you're not disrupting, you're dying." Third slide. A screen grab of someone's tweet dunking on old dudes with yellow legal pads. And wouldn't you know it, he pointed right at me. "I want to start by saying we're not in the 1990s anymore," he smirked. "No offense to anyone still using pens. Or, God forbid, paper." Laughter. Actual chuckles from people I'd trained, mentored, vouched for. I just sat there, arms crossed, biting the inside of my cheek like it owed me money. What none of them knew was that my notebook, the battered red Moleskine I'd been carrying since 2011, was already open on the table, right next to his company-issued iPad, which he tapped like a toddler discovering peanut butter for the first time. My pen moved in slow, methodical arcs. Not doodles, not quotes. Data, risk models, vendor chatter I'd picked up from a contact in Singapore 2 days earlier. It wasn't obsolete. It was field-tested paranoia. But that day, I wasn't important anymore. Derek was the shiny new brainchild of the board, brought in to reimagine efficiency, streamline legacy systems, and modernize market strategy. He'd spent 4 months at McKinsey and 12 years at Instagram, or maybe the other way around, judging by the way he talked. Every other word out of his mouth was synergy, agility, or vertical innovation. After the all-hands, he held a breakout strategy session with key department heads. I wasn't technically invited. Still showed up. Sat in the corner. Didn't say a word. Just flipped to a page in my notebook I'd labeled Red Flag Markets. Q4. I wasn't grandstanding. I wasn't even mad yet. I just wanted to know what kind of idiot we were dealing with. He walked in late, wearing a tailored suit that screamed, "Look at me. I'm expensive and empty." First thing he said wasn't hello. It was, "All right, who's ready to replace spreadsheets with brainwaves?" No one knew what that meant. They laughed anyway. He clicked through slides like he was dealing blackjack at a Vegas bachelor party. Currency trends, vendor pipelines, market expansion plans, a heat map of hot zones that were supposed to be our international growth push. Every dot on that map matched a place I'd scribbled warnings about: unstable economies, volatile currencies, partners with pending litigation. But none of that made the cut for his TED Talk. At one point, he glanced over at me and did a double take. "Wait, what is that?" He pointed at the notebook. I looked up. "It's where I write things down." "Like, with your hand?" He tilted his head like a confused golden retriever. "Man, that is adorable. What is this, Mad Men?" Snickers. One guy actually leaned over to snap a photo. I smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile you give when someone mistakes your shotgun for a broomstick. "Call it what you want," I said. "Just don't call me when the cloud's down and your AI can't explain why your currency contracts look like a Ponzi scheme." His laugh came too quick. Nervous. He thought I was joking. They moved on without me. Talked over me. He finished with a flashy product roadmap that looked like it was made in Canva by someone high on startup fumes. Ended the session with a standing ovation from his new innovation team. Mostly recent hires from marketing and one guy who used to run a crypto podcast. I closed my notebook. Made a note on the last page. "He'll burn the house down, and I'll be blamed for not calling the fire department. Start archiving receipts." When I stood up to leave, Derek offered me a wink and said, "We'll get you one of those voice-to-text tools, Grandpa. Welcome to the future." I didn't respond, but I was already halfway through cataloging every risk he'd missed, and the fuse he'd just lit under $40 million in international exposure. And on page 1 of that red notebook, written in thick, slanted ink, Derek M. Risk timeline begins here. Derek called it strategic exfoliation. Said it with a straight face, too. Like he was selling a damn skincare line instead of gutting the very systems that had kept this place from hemorrhaging money for the last decade. The reorg started on a Monday. By Wednesday, half the senior analysts were either reassigned, repurposed, or just quietly vanished from the org chart like CIA assets gone cold. Derek brought in a pack of consultants who all looked like they got dressed in the dark at a Patagonia outlet. One introduced himself as a data futurist. Another said his title was growth shaman. I shit you not. The guy who used to double-check overseas vendor compliance? Gone. The woman who handled foreign currency risk mitigation? Reassigned to social media analytics. Derek's rationale? We're shifting from risk aversion to risk fluidity. I asked him once what that meant. He smiled like he just farted confidence. It means we're not afraid to move fast. Into oncoming traffic? I muttered. That week, he held a strategic velocity summit, which turned out to be a Zoom call with a virtual whiteboard where people drew smiley faces next to slogans like fail fast, win faster, and markets are just feelings. Meanwhile, I was back at my desk with the red notebook open, watching Derek's expansion heat map slide onto every department wall like it was gospel. But something didn't add up. Vendor 314 Beta, one of the shiny new international partners Derek had fast-tracked through procurement, had shown up in my notes months earlier. A small logistics firm based in a region with a currency so volatile it made crypto look stable. I had flagged them for inconsistent reporting, pending legal issues, and suspiciously vague board affiliations. Under the old system, they never would have passed vetting. Under Derek's system, they were visionary disruptors in the microfreight vertical. I started making notes again, quietly, page after page. Vendor 314 Beta, previously denied. Approved without compliance trail. Currency exposure risk at 8.2%. Derek's dashboard shows 0.8%. Is it rounded or wrong? Expansion forecast assumes Q3 stability. IMF report says otherwise. Email to finance. Are we hedged? No reply. Derek didn't notice or didn't care. He was too busy doing interviews for company press releases, quoting Naval Ravikant and telling HR to modernize internal culture. That meant standing desks, kombucha on tap, and replacing 3 senior financial auditors with a single machine learning solution that couldn't even pronounce half the vendor names. When I tried to raise questions in the Tuesday sync, he cut me off before I finished a sentence. Mark, we appreciate your passion, he said, not looking up from his iPad. But we need to move with confidence, not hesitation. Let's focus on outcomes. I nodded, said nothing, scribbled 2 words in the margin of my notebook. Cracks forming. The next day, I noticed something subtle. The API data Derek's team was pulling for currency trends had a 4-day lag. Not a glitch, just old code they never verified. That lag meant the automated dashboards were showing outdated market volatility indexes. If we were making real-time investment decisions based on them, we were flying blind over a canyon and calling it a runway. I flagged it, quietly, sent a message to IT and CC'd Derek's team. Silence. Then the dashboards disappeared for 6 hours and came back looking refreshed. No explanation. Just a Slack from one of Derek's interns that read, "Thanks for the catch, Grandpa. We patched the bug. All good now." I didn't reply, but I wrote another note. They're using sandpaper on a gas leak. Every page of that red notebook was becoming a trail of breadcrumbs. One Derek would never follow because he thought breadcrumbs were for people without GPS. But I knew this forest. I'd watched it grow, and I could smell rot in the roots. Derek called another all-hands to announce the final wave of expansion vendors. I watched from the back as he high-fived his strategy pod and unveiled a slick animation of our global footprint growing by 62% overnight. The crowd clapped. I flipped to a blank page and drew a big, red X over 3 vendor codes, then wrote one line in all caps. If this launches, we'll bleed. HR sent the invite like they always do. No subject line, just meeting request at 3:15 p.m. in conference room B. And when you've been around long enough, you know what that time slot means. It's the corporate equivalent of a cattle bolt to the skull. I closed the notebook slowly, tucked it under my arm, and walked down the corridor I'd helped design 15 years ago. Back when the company still thought open office was a fire hazard instead of a productivity hack. Half the people I passed gave me the look. You know the one. That wide-eyed sympathy people reserve for car crashes they don't want to admit they're driving toward. Inside the conference room, Derek, still scrolling on his iPad, and Nancy from HR, clipboard, tight smile, hand sanitizer ready like I was going to spit in her eye. "Mark," Derek said without looking up. "Thanks for coming in. Didn't really have a choice, did I?" That finally made him look up. Smug. Rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this in a mirror that morning while applying whatever beard oil helps sociopaths smell like cedar and fraud. Nancy cleared her throat. "We'll keep this brief. As part of our realignment strategy, your position has been identified as overlapping with new systems being implemented across the strategy and risk teams. This isn't performance-based. It's just a strategic shift. Strategic shift. That's rich. You're being offered a generous severance package," she continued, sliding a folder across the table like it was a peace treaty. "We'd like your transition completed by end of week." I didn't open it. Didn't blink. Derek chimed in like a game show host who just revealed the wrong door. "Look, Mark, you've been here a long time. Your insights have value, but we need to lean into more agile frameworks. It's nothing personal. Nothing ever is," I said. The silence that followed felt like wet cement. Could have argued. I could have shown them my tracking logs, the flagged vendors, the emails they ghosted, the dashboards that had been quietly patched after my notes. But I didn't, because I knew exactly what would happen next. And I wasn't going to stop it. I was going to document it. I stood up, took the red notebook from under my arm, walked around the table, calm as a coma, and placed it, gently, on the polished slab of reclaimed wood Derek called a desk. He frowned at it like I just handed him a used napkin. "What's this?" he asked. "Start with page 1, I said. "You'll need it." His fingers hovered over the cover but didn't open it. Like the thing might bite. Nancy looked uncomfortable. She should have. "I'll collect my things," I said. "Don't worry. I won't take anything that matters. Wouldn't want to disrupt the velocity of your collapse." No one laughed. I left the room without looking back. No goodbyes. No grand gesture. Just the soft echo of my footsteps and the sound of a chapter slamming shut. Back at my desk, I packed a cardboard box like in every sad office movie. Photos, coffee mug, old badge. But not the notebook. That was still sitting on Derek's desk like a loaded gun with the safety off. As I walked out, I passed the strategy wall, his pride and joy, full of pinned vendor maps, financial projections, and branding slogans. One corner was starting to curl from the heat of the ceiling vent. I paused just long enough to mutter under my breath. Paper burns faster than data, but at least you see the smoke. Then I walked into the elevator, pressed L, and disappeared from the building like I'd never been there at all. But the notebook stayed, waiting. Derek called it Ignition Week, like he was launching a rocket instead of strapping the company to a live grenade and yanking the pin with his teeth. All hands were on deck. Interns wore matching shirts that said, "Velocity is victory." Finance had a catered breakfast bar. The company Slack lit up with gifts of fireworks and champagne bottles, and that damn Steve Jobs quote he loved to abuse. Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. Except this wasn't innovation. It was inertia disguised as brilliance. He'd bypassed the traditional 5-phase risk review and replaced it with what he called a lean confidence model. Basically, a glorified hunch given a bar graph. The vendor onboarding process that used to take 6 weeks now took 3 days and a few thumbs-up emojis in Slack. If a company had a logo and an invoice generator, they were good to go. I wasn't there, of course. I was watching from the outside like a retired firefighter listening to the firehouse burn over a police scanner. The notebook? Still on his desk, probably unopened, gathering dust under a cold brew ring and Derek's own sense of invincibility. But the dashboard numbers looked fantastic. Green across the board. Immediate upticks in engagement, vendor reach, projected quarterly growth. The whole system was designed to reward the present and ignore the cliff at the end of the quarter. People drank the Kool-Aid like it was vintage Pinot. Marketing started blasting the expansion on LinkedIn. Proud to be part of a company that doesn't just think globally, but acts globally. Photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies in countries with triple-digit inflation. A 3-slide carousel about strategic vendor synergies, next to a GIF of Elon Musk dancing. Derek even did a live stream AMA with the COO, answering pre-screened questions while sipping oat milk out of a reusable beaker. Said phrases like market transcendence and borderless scaling with a straight face. Meanwhile, somewhere in that same building, someone finally blinked. A senior finance analyst, Claire, the one who double-checks international payment cycles, spoke up during a budget sync. Quietly, carefully. "Didn't Mark raise concerns about some of these vendors?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The room paused. Not dramatically, just a small hitch in the constant hum of agreement. Derek didn't flinch. "Mark was a good guy," he said, like delivering a eulogy for a pet hamster. "But he was risk-averse. This model rewards agility." Claire didn't argue, just nodded and scribbled something on her iPad. "But I know the look. I've seen it 1,000 times. That quiet moment where someone realizes the ship is listing, but it's still too early to say out loud that it's sinking." Somewhere around day 3 of the rollout, the automation kicked in. Cross-border payments executed through a smart contract system. Derek bought off a startup that had blockchain in the name and zero real oversight. Contracts were locked, rates were pegged, and a dozen high-risk vendors were now legally fused to our financial arteries. At the weekly department update, Derek walked in like a victory parade in human form. "We're global now, folks. I hope your passports are up to date." Applause. Standing ovation, even. No one noticed that the currency exchange rates being pulled for one of our new African vendors were based on government-reported values, ones that hadn't been updated in 6 months. No one checked that a key logistics partner in Southeast Asia had just been flagged in an international watchdog report for contract manipulation. No one questioned why 3 of the 5 new growth zones were flagged red in the IMF's latest fiscal stability bulletin. They didn't ask because the dashboard said 18.4% in bold green. And Derek? He was already talking about Phase 2, expansion into Eastern Europe, new SaaS partnerships, AI-driven contract execution. The CEO stopped by his office that afternoon, clapped him on the back, and said, "Now this is the kind of leadership we needed." Derek smiled. "We move fast or we die slow." They both laughed. The notebook still sat on the shelf behind him, untouched. Page 1 had the words, "Vendor 314 beta. Do not engage. Risk tier. Catastrophic. Currency warning. Peg expected to collapse by Q4. It was Q4, and the collapse was 4 hours away. The first domino fell at 10:47 a.m. An automated Slack alert pinged in the finance channel. Vendor 314 beta. Payment failure. Code 903. Account frozen. Most folks ignored it. Just another hiccup in the post-launch dust. Happens all the time, right? Then at 10:52 a.m., an emergency message came from the Treasury lead. "Anyone have clarity on the currency hedge status for 314 beta? Their local bank's been suspended by the regional government. Exchange rate is plummeting." Plummeting was generous. By 11:06 a.m., the currency had dropped 28% and was still falling. The automated payment system, designed to move faster than a human could react, had already pushed through 7-figure transactions based on pre-collapse rates. Locked. Irreversible. A digital guillotine with a smiling emoji attached. At 11:13 a.m., the Slack emoji reactions stopped entirely. By 11:18 a.m., for more vendors defaulted, either because of frozen assets, blacklisted intermediaries, or in one case because the damn company no longer legally existed. Turns out, one of the disruptive freight partners was flagged in a UN corruption report 2 weeks prior. The machine learning didn't catch it. It was in a PDF. By 11:31 a.m., Ops and Legal were pinging Derek's team nonstop. No one answered. Half of them had slipped out for launch brunch at a rooftop bar 3 blocks away. The company card had covered a champagne toast 30 minutes before the company hemorrhaged its first 10 million. By 11:47 a.m., the CFO finally stormed into Derek's office, pale and shaking, clutching a laptop like a bomb technician. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" she hissed. Derek, eyes wide and blinking fast, stammered something about rogue volatility and unexpected partner-side disruption. The CFO flipped her screen around. The payments were locked. Smart contracts. No manual override. We just transferred $40 million into what's essentially a fiscal black hole. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a kid who touched a stove and was trying to convince himself it wasn't hot. Bad data, he said finally, voice cracking. That has to be it. Something corrupted the currency stream. Maybe the IMF feed didn't update or. The data wasn't bad. Claire from finance snapped from the doorway. The data was ignored. People were flooding into the hallway now, legal, compliance, audit. Phones glued to ears, whispers sharpening into arguments. Then came the voice that cut through everything. The CEO. He'd just stepped out of a partner lunch and walked straight into chaos. His tie was still tucked under his blazer like he hadn't had time to adjust for the explosion. "What's going on?" he barked, eyes scanning the frantic faces. Claire turned. Vendor 314 beta defaulted. Currency tanked. We're exposed through 7 contracts. All automated. No hedges. The CEO's expression didn't change. "We're down how much?" "40 million. Someone muttered from the back. Silence. Then he turned slowly to Derek, who was now visibly sweating, his iPad trembling in his hands like it might start confessing on its own. "You vetted this?" Derek looked around like a man searching for an escape hatch in a submarine. We had oversight. We ran projections. The algorithm cleared the partnerships. And there was no formal objection in the risk portal." "The risk portal?" the CEO snapped. "You think I care what your dashboard said? I want to know who signed off on this expansion. Who actually reviewed the risk?" Derek opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again and whispered, "Mark might have said something a while back." The CEO's jaw clenched. "Mark? The guy you fired?" Derek didn't answer. A moment passed. Then the CEO turned to Claire. "Get me every single document that mentions 314 beta. Every flagged email. Every missed alert. Every projection from the past 90 days. Claire nodded. Already on it. Derek sank into his chair. The iPad finally slipped from his grip and hit the floor with a dull thud. By lunchtime, the champagne glasses were still sticky in the kitchen sink. But the mood had curdled into a funeral march. And across the building, buried under a stack of unused consultant decks in Derek's office, was a red notebook. Page 1, bold ink. Currency collapse window, 60 to 90 days. Vendor 314 beta not financially solvent. Do not onboard. No dashboard had predicted it. No AI had warned them. But the first page had .it was an intern, of course. Not one of Derek's golden hires, mind you. Not the ones who wore Allbirds and tweeted startup quotes between espresso shots. No, this was one of the old batch. Jess. Quiet. Still printed her spreadsheets. Still asked good questions in meetings. The kind of employee Derek never bothered to remember existed. She'd been told to help legal gather the paper trail. And when she asked where Derek's expansion vetting docs were stored, someone from compliance replied, "Check his desk or his cloud folder. Whichever one he hasn't nuked yet." So she did. She started with the digital archive. Nothing. Derek's shared drive had been scrubbed cleaner than a politician's phone before an ethics hearing. Meeting notes? Gone. Slack exports? Redacted. Risk dashboards? Archived with no author metadata. There wasn't a single file left that predated the launch by more than 2 weeks. No emails, no memos, no paper audit trail. Just holes where warnings should have been. That's when she opened the bottom drawer of his office credenza. It was wedged between a stack of untouched consultant reports and a world's best strategist mug still half full of something that smelled like fermented oat milk. The red notebook. She almost missed it. Almost. Inside the front cover. A handwritten index. Tight, methodical, obsessive. Vendor numbers. Currency forecasts. Political instability summaries. Notes scribbled in real time, with date stamps and signature initials. It read like a financial crime novel written by someone who'd already read the ending. She flipped to the first page. and froze. Vendor 314 beta. Risk tier, catastrophic. Pending litigation flagged in June. Currency volatility projected Q4 collapse. No AML transparency. Denied under legacy compliance 3x. Recommendation: do not engage. Estimated risk exposure: $12 million to $40 million. Dated 8 weeks before launch. Initialed MC. Just scanned more pages. Vendor after vendor. Each name matching the current collapse. Each flagged long before Derek's expansion. She ran her finger across the edge of the page like it might burn her. At the back of the notebook, clipped under a folded sticky note, was a printed copy of a memo. Not digital. Not shared via Slack. Physical. The header read, Risk Briefing Expansion Partners, Q4. Compiled by Mark Collins. The signature at the bottom? The CO's. Handwritten. Ink on paper. Dated 9 weeks prior. A signature acknowledging receipt of the exact risk profile now gutting the company from the inside out. Jess walked into the war room without knocking. Slammed the notebook on the table. Derek flinched like it was a gunshot. The CEO turned, mid-sentence, and stared down at the red cover like it was radioactive. Jess said nothing, just opened it. Page 1 faced up like a gravestone. No one spoke for almost 30 seconds. The CEO stepped forward slowly. Read the page in full. Then turned to the clipped memo and paled. His finger hovered over his own signature, visibly trembling. I remember this, he whispered. I thought we tabled this. Where's the digital copy? Derek, standing in the corner like a damp scarecrow, finally spoke. There was a realignment of data flow, he mumbled. Old methods weren't integrated. The notebook wasn't in the portal. Because you fired the man who wrote it, the CEO snapped. And then deleted the archive. Legal stepped in with a clipboard. We've confirmed it, she said quietly. No digital trace of these warnings exists. Not anymore. All we've got is this. They all stared at the red notebook like it might start bleeding. Jess looked around the room, at the board members, the legal counsel, the execs clenching their jaws like they were chewing glass. Then she spoke calmly. You asked who vetted the risk. It was him. And you ignored it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was grief. Grief for the money, for the trust, for the reality that everything had been preventable, if anyone had just read the first damn page. The CEO sat down hard in the chair closest to him. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just kept staring at his own signature. The boardroom was set at 68 degrees and still managed to feel like a furnace. Derek sat at the far end of the table, shoulders stiff, lips pressed together like a man trying to keep his lunch and his lies down at the same time. The CEO stood, pacing, the red notebook in one hand like it was radioactive. Half the board hadn't even taken their seats before he started. We lost $40 million, the CEO said flatly. $40 million. Because someone decided that speed was more important than scrutiny. Derek shifted in his chair. His suit jacket looked suddenly 2 sizes too big. Sweat had pooled under his collar and was starting to darken the fabric. A drop rolled down from his temple and slid across his cheek like punctuation. With all due respect, he said finally, those notes were informal, archaic. They weren't part of the vetted workflow. They weren't even digitized. The CEO slammed the notebook on the table. The sound cracked like a rifle shot. Did you read them? Derek blinked. Don't deflect. Did you read the notebook before launching the expansion? I didn't think I needed to. We had digital systems. A board member, Angela, mid-60s, ex-SEC, zero tolerance for bullshit, cut in. That wasn't the question. The question was, did you read the damn thing? Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No, he admitted. I didn't. There it was. Angela turned to the rest of the board and said calmly, then we're not talking about outdated methods. We're talking about willful negligence. Another board member, Patel, steepled his fingers. We've seen the memo. We've seen the match between vendor failures and the warnings in that notebook. And we've seen your signature approving the launch. I didn't have all the context, Derek mumbled. I assumed the dashboards. Angela cut in again. You replaced the man who had the context with a chatbot and an intern. That stung. Derek winced. His carefully built persona of disruptive genius was unraveling like a startup pitch deck in a thunderstorm. The CEO, still standing, turned toward legal. Recommendations. Legal cleared their throat. We advise immediate suspension pending internal review. Possible breach of fiduciary duty. Derek stood like he'd just been told the ground was lava. You can't be serious. Suspension? For a notebook? This company needs innovation. Not. You innovated us straight into a $40 million crater, the CEO snapped. You buried the warnings, erased the trail, and mocked the only person who saw this coming. Silence. Derek looked around the room, desperate for an ally. None looked back. No one spoke up for him. Even the junior board member who once parroted his buzzwords was now reading the printed risk report like it was his own obituary. Angela leaned forward, voice low and sharp. This company doesn't need faster failures. It needs someone who can see the failures before they happen. There it was. The first signal. The first crack of light. Seeds being planted. The room didn't say Mark's name, but they didn't have to. The red notebook sat in the center of the table now. Its pages open. Read. Respected. Everything Derek had dismissed as obsolete had become evidence. Testimony. Prophecy. The CEO finally spoke again. Calm now. Escort him out. Pull his access. Freeze his files. Derek looked stunned, betrayed, smaller than he'd ever been in that room. His exit was quiet. No shouting. Just the soft sound of a broken man walking barefoot through the glass he'd thrown. When the door clicked shut behind him, the CEO took a seat and looked around. We need someone who knew what was coming, he said. Before the next hit comes. No one disagreed. The trout weren't biting, but I didn't care. That wasn't the point. I was 3 days into a long overdue silence up at the cabin. No Wi-Fi, no Slack pings, no whiplash-inducing pivot decks. Just the slow hum of late fall wind skimming across the lake and the occasional creak of old wood under my boots. I had a fire going, half a beer left, and a half-unread copy of The Art of War sitting spine up next to a pile of split kindling. That's when the burner phone buzzed. No one had that number except the local bait shop and, apparently, now the CEO's assistant. Hi, Mr. Collins? She said, cautiously polite. This is Andrea from Mr. Stafford's office. He's asking if you'd be available for a brief conversation sometime today. I reeled in slow. Nothing on the line. Just the ripple of water and the echo of opportunity. Sure, I said. Put him on. Pause. Then the sound of a phone being passed. Then his voice. Less bark than usual, like someone had wrung the starch out of it. Mark. Still alive, I replied. Surprised. He exhaled through the receiver. You have no idea how many times I've replayed that meeting where you dropped the notebook on Derek's desk. You should have read it. You're right. Silence hung. Not awkward. Just earned. He cleared his throat. The boards asked me to reach out. Formally. They believe we need a different kind of foresight. Not a dashboard. Not another overpriced consultant with a lab-grown MBA. Someone who can read between the lines again. Someone like, well, you. I let the moment breathe. Then I grinned, even though he couldn't see it. Fax me the offer. A beat. He didn't laugh. So I did. Just kidding. That's not how this works anymore. He chuckled faintly. Wounded, maybe. Or humbled. Fair, he said. What would work for you? I stood there, watching the trees tremble across the lake, yellow and red leaves drifting like slow fire across the water. I'll write my own terms, I said finally. By hand. I'll courier them in. If the board signs off, we'll talk next steps. And if they don't, then I keep fishing. Simple. No bluffs. No ego. Just math. Because what he needed wasn't an employee. He needed a lifeline. And lifelines don't beg. They dictate. The fire crackled behind me as the line went quiet. Then his voice came back, slower, lower. All right, send it in. We'll read every word. I know you will, I said. This time. I hung up. No goodbyes. Just the soft clack of the old flip phone closing like a punctuation mark on a sentence I'd started writing long before Derek ever darkened my whiteboard. Inside the cabin, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. No logo, no template, just a pen, my terms, and the kind of leverage you only earn by being right when it mattered most. First line, non-negotiable. I don't report to anyone who thinks a Slack bot counts as a strategic plan. Second line, board-level access, independent authority over vendor approvals, and final say on all risk protocols. Third line, underlined, no titles, just results. I didn't ask for a desk. I didn't ask for a team. I asked for power, the kind they'd ignored, until it cost them $40 million to remember. The lobby hadn't changed. Same brushed metal finishes. Same overpriced art that looked like it was made with an AI and a hangover. Same receptionist, too, though she didn't make eye contact this time. Just nodded slowly, like she wasn't sure if I was a ghost or a lawsuit. Upstairs, the walls were quieter. Derek's velocity wall had been stripped bare. Nothing left but pushpin scars and a faint outline where his expansion map used to hang. His glass-walled office? Empty. Not a pen out of place. Not a monitor glowing. Just a chair, facing inward, and a faint trace of cologne clinging to the desperation that used to sit in it. They cleared him out fast. The boardroom was full. Every seat taken. Some faces I knew, some I'd warned. No one spoke as I entered. No handshake parade. No water bottle offered. Just space made at the end of the long table, where a leather pad and a Montblanc pen sat untouched. I set them aside and placed my own document in the center. 8 pages. No fonts, no logos, no boilerplate jargon. Just clean, deliberate handwriting on heavy stock paper. My terms. The CEO leaned forward first. Read page 1 like it was an obituary. Probably was, for a lot of his assumptions. Page 2 detailed the reporting structure. I'd answer directly to the board, not the executive tier. No dotted lines. No back channels. Page 3 granted me full veto power over international expansion and high-risk vendor contracts, with a mandate to halt activity on site without delay or appeal. Page 4 outlined a clause that said if my warnings were ignored again, I walked with a severance that would make Derek's look like spare change. Page 5 named 3 departments I'd need partial access to, not to manage but to see. The rest? Governance, authority, oversight, and a simple note at the bottom. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to keep you solvent. No one objected. No one even flinched. Angela, the SEC veteran with eyes that could slice concrete, read every word before giving a sharp nod. Patel signed next, muttering, God help us if you ever go fishing full-time. The CEO hesitated only a second before signing. He looked older now, smaller, not broken, just recently introduced to humility. You know, he said quietly as he capped the pen, we could have saved a lot of pain if we'd listened earlier. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Most people only learn from heat once they're already on fire. He exhaled, stood, and offered a hand. This time I took it, briefly. I didn't ask where they put Derek. I didn't need to know. His story was written in binary now, zeros, ones, and a very long trail of red ink. Mine was still ink on paper. As I walked out, I passed the strategy hall, walls now scrubbed clean, waiting for new maps, new charts, new ambition. I paused for a moment, just long enough to slide a single sheet into a blank frame. One line, written in my hand. Turns out, when everything's digital, the one thing no one reads is the first page.